Windsbraut is a song by the German band Versengold, first released as a single in 2021, then in 2022 as part of their album Was kostet die Welt. In this video I will work through the song, translating and explaining all the lyrics. If you want to follow along, there are links to the song and the band in the description and on screen. They sing quite clearly, so it shouldn't be too hard to follow along. I will also provide timestamps for each section of lyrics as I discuss them. If you're listening on Spotify, the lyrics are all available and time-matched as part of their service. Just click the microphone icon in the bottom right of the screen. So the title of this song is Windsbraut. This is a compound noun of Wind, meaning wind, and Braut, meaning bride. Literally, it means bride of the wind, but its actual translation is tempest, gale, or whirlwind. Basically a storm with the focus on the wind. So let's begin the song. This is the first verse. I'll read through it first, try to pick out what you can, and then I'll break it down. Als ich einst im Regen im Dünengras stand, hörte ich ein Singen vom rauschenden Strand. Tief in der Brandung mit wehendem Haar sang dort ein Mädchen unbändig und klar. The first line here is an als clause subordinate to the second line. That is, it's a clause beginning with the word als, the word for when used in the past tense, which modifies the clause on the second line. Since als is a subordinating conjunction, it sends the verb, in this case stand, to the end of the clause. A subordinate clause can come before or after the main clause. Here it comes before and forms the whole first idea of the sentence, meaning that the verb of the main clause, hörte, follows directly after. Word for word, these first two lines are: when I once in the rain in the dune grass stood, heard I a singing from the murmuring beach. So the main grammar points are im and vom, which are contracted forms of in dem, in the, and von dem, from the, respectively, and that stand is the irregular first and third person past tense form of stehen, to stand. Hörte is also past tense, but it's formed regularly by addition of t. Rauschend is the present participle of rauschen, a present participle being the equivalent to a word ending with the English suffix ing. The words you might not know here are einst, meaning once or at some point, either in the past or the future, Dünengras, a compound of Düne, meaning dune, and Gras, meaning grass, and Rauschen, meaning something like rustling, murmuring, or rushing, basically making a gentle but constant sound like breaking waves or rustling paper. The second two lines are constructed similarly to the first. The first line forms the first idea, then the verb, sang, then the rest of the sentence. Word for word we have: deep in the breakers with fluttering hair sang there a girl, unrestrained and clear. This is again quite simple. The two grammar points are that sang is the first and third person irregular past tense of singen, to sing, and to remember that Mädchen, girl, is neuter, not feminine. The harder words are Brandung, meaning breakers or waves which break, Wehend, the present participle of wehen, meaning to blow, either of the wind itself or as a result of the wind, in the way of loose hair or the fluttering of a flag. Unbändig means free, wild, or unrestrained. It's related to bändigen, meaning to tame, and binden, meaning to tie. Here's the second verse. Again, I'll read it through. Take a minute to work out what you can, then I'll go into more detail. Sie erhob sich, die See und der Wind, als wenn sie den Sturm aus dem Himmelszelt spinnt. Flocht sie behende ein Netz aus den Böen, stieg aus der schäumenden Gischt in die Höhe. Again, I'll split this verse into two sets of 2 lines and talk through them individually. Here, the second line is subordinate to the first. However, although it begins with als, this does not mean when, as it did previously. Als can also mean as, and wenn, while it is the present tense counterpart of als, also means if. The phrase als wenn, therefore, means as if, or as though. Wenn is still subordinating, though, hence why the verb is sent to the end of the sentence. Erhob is the irregular first and third person past tense form of erheben, to raise. It has a meaning of to rise or to rise up when reflective, so together with sich, the third person reflexive pronoun, means rose. While you may have seen the word in constructions like zu, it's also a preposition meaning about or around. The word for word is around her raised themselves the sea and the wind, as if she the storm out of the heavens spins. Aus can denote a material as well as origin. Himmelszelt is a poetic word, not commonly used in everyday speech. It's a compound of the word Himmel, meaning heaven, and Zelt, meaning tent. Spinnen, meaning to spin, refers to spinning thread out of fibres, as on a spinning wheel. These lines would translate to something like, the sea and the wind rose around her as if she was spinning the storm out of the sky. In the next half of the verse, we see again the use of the present participle, here schäumend, from the verb schäumen, meaning to foam or to froth. In these lines, the verbs come at the start of their clauses. On the first line, this is simply a poetic change for the sake of the sound and the rhythm of the song. On the second line, it's using the same subject, sie, as the first line, so this is able to be omitted. Note that at the end we have a phrase using in. If this were followed by the dative case, it would have a stative meaning, in the height. But since it has the accusative, it's dynamic, into the height. This is because the verb is one of movement. The subject is moving into the object, not just around within it. Word for word, we have wove she nimbly a net out of the gusts, rose out of the frothing foam in the height. Here, behende is acting as an adverb, so means nimbly rather than nimble. Flocht is the irregular past tense of flechten, to plait or to weave. This verb is unusual in that it also has a set of regular past forms, which are used more widely. The irregular forms would almost never appear in modern spoken German, but sound more literary. So if you use this verb, be sure only to use the irregular forms in formal writing or not at all. Böen is the plural of böen, gust. You may instead hear the form böe used in the singular, but this word is more common as a plural anyway. Stieg is the irregular past form of steigen, another word for to rise. Both schäumen and gischt mean froth or foam, in their verbal and nominative forms respectively. Gischt is usually specific to sea foam, but schäumen can describe the foaming of anything. Finally, hö is a contracted form of hö, meaning height. It's in this form to flow better with the song, and in this context should probably be translated as air, with the second line here as a whole meaning rose out of the frothing foam and into the air. Next up is the chorus. This is repeated a few times later in the song, so I'll mention whenever it comes back up. As you can see, there's repetition within the chorus itself. The first and second, and third and fourth lines are almost identical, apart from the verb at the end of the second. There is then a different line after each pair. The chorus is the same every time it occurs in the song, so this is all the variation for it. The first and fourth lines are a fairly simple imperative, a command. Hör is the singular imperative of hören, and mich is the accusative first-person pronoun. As in English, the imperative verb usually goes to the beginning of the sentence. The second and fifth lines are also imperatives, this time with the verb lassen, meaning to let. Since this is taking up the usual position of the verb, the main verb of the sentence goes to the end. On the second line, this verb is singen, to sing, and on the fifth, it's gehen, to go, contracted here to gehen. Mit dir means with you. Mit is always followed by the dative, so dir is used here. It's the dative form of du. The two remaining lines are as follows. Im Schleier des Regens auf wogenden Schwingen, im Auge des Sturms vom Winde verweht. Both of these lines contain examples of the genitive case, the case used to show possession. The typical genitive construction is by placing the possessor with the genitive article after the possessee. This echoes the X of Y construction in English. It's now becoming more and more common, especially in spoken German, to use a dative construction to show possession, rather than the genitive, so a learner must have a good grasp of both methods. The second line also shows an example of the passive voice. The passive is used to change the object of a sentence into the subject. In German, this is done with the verb werden and the past participle. If you want to specify a subject, the by in English, this is done with the preposition von. In the example in the song, werden is left out and the subject is implied, so all we get left with is the von phrase and the past participle. Two lines word for word are in the haze of the rain on undulating wings and in the eye of the storm from the wind blown away. Schleier means haze, veil, fog or mist and is often used for vision obscuring water droplets in fog or in rain. Wogen is difficult to translate to English here. It's translated as undulate, but specifically describes the movement of waves on the sea. Therefore, while it's being used here to describe wings, it's linking back to the idea of the sea and the storm prevalent in this song. Verwehen means to blow away, usually in the wind. On to the third verse. I'll read it out, then break it down. Ihr Kleid war aus Federn, die wirbelnd wie Schnee sie herum wehten zum Tanz mit der See. Ich sah ihre Augen, es schien mir, als wär ihr Blick wie ein Spiegel vom tosenden Meer. The first two lines, in my opinion, contain the most beautiful lyrics in the song. These lines contain a relative clause. A relative clause is used to add information about a noun. It's introduced by a relative pronoun, which is usually the same as the definite articles, but which is inflected slightly differently. Other words can also be used, such as was and welche, but if this is a new concept to you, first master the article-like pronouns. Word for word, the lines are Her dress was out of feathers which, swirling like snow, around her, around blew, to the dance with the sea. You'll see repetition of around here. Herum is a word meaning about or around, and is most often used in a construction with in front of the object. Remember that takes the accusative case, and that the accusative of sie is still just sie. Wirbelnd is the present participle of wirbeln, to swirl. This isn't actually the verb of the clause. Weten is the verb. Wirbelnd is acting more as a describer, perhaps an adverb. A translation of these two lines would be something like, her dress was made out of feathers, which swirling like snow blew around her in her dance with the sea. The second two lines of the verse contain an example of the subjunctive mood. The subjunctive is used to describe non-real events. You may have come across the verbs möchte, would like, or hätte, would have. These are subjunctive forms of mögen, to like, and haben, to have. While all verbs do have a subjunctive form, not all use it often. Those which don't tend to use instead a construction you likely have come across before, by using werden, would, itself the subjunctive form of werden, to be going to. In the song we see wäre, the first and third person subjunctive form of sein, to be. We also see use of als here. You may remember how earlier we saw the phrase als wenn. This isn't actually the normal way of saying as if. Usually speakers would just say als. Als does not send the verb to the end of the sentence here, instead acting as the first idea, with the verb following directly after. Word for word we have, I saw her eyes. It seemed to me as if were her look like a surface from the raging sea. Sah is the first and third singular past tense of sehen, to see. Likewise, schien is the first and third singular past of scheinen, to appear or to seem. Spiegel means mirror, but can also describe the surface of a liquid or the level or concentration of one. Tosen means to rage, to roar, or to thunder, usually of the sea, a storm, or other forces of nature. The website wortbedeutung.info, which caters to native German speakers, describes it as to produce continuous thundering sounds through wild movement. I mentioned earlier how, in addition to the genitive, a dative von can also be used to show possession. This is illustrated here on the last line. At the end of this verse, we're exactly halfway through the song, but due to the repetition and instrumental components of the second half, there's only one new section of lyrics to go over. The chorus plays between these times, followed by an instrumental section, so the next verse begins at 2 minutes 51. Lines 1 and 3 of this verse are the same, so I'll go over this first. There are 3 verbs in this line, all of which are in the imperative mood. These verbs are halten, to hold, tragen, which you may know as to wear, but also means to carry, and wehen, to blow. The first 2 verbs explicitly take mich as their objects, but the last either doesn't take an object or just implies it to be mich again. The second line is a little more complex. Wenn here means if. Gehe is the form of gehen used with ich, just with the final e elided, as is common in casual speech. Mit dir, of course, means with you. Den and eins in this context make the sentence a little difficult to translate perfectly. They almost act as filler words to fit with the rhythm, but do still add subtleties of meaning. They're examples of the sort of words to make your speech sound more natural. Den usually means because, for, or since. It can be used to express surprise in a question, and is often used in rhetorical questions. The meaning we're after here, though, is something like then, thus, or so. It indicates a sequence of events or a consequence of an action. Eins, of course, means one, but it can also express a sense of agreement or unity. In the context of this line, it indicates togetherness between the two participants, but is perhaps a little weaker than specifically using the word zusammen, meaning together. We can therefore translate the first two lines of this verse as something like, "Hold me, carry me, and blow me away if I go away together with you." The third line is the same as the first, and the last looks like this. Über can mean over, above, or across. Since it uses the accusative case, it expresses movement, so would translate to across. Weiten is the plural of weite, meaning width, distance, or expanse. Finally, der here is genitive. Since der is the feminine genitive article, see here means see. Remember that see is one of those weird German words which have different meanings depending on its gender. As a feminine noun, it means sea, while when masculine, it means lake. My slightly roundabout way of remembering this is with the phrase Der See ist in der See. Since a lake is generally smaller than a sea, it could fit inside one. The first See is in the nominative, so is masculine, while the second is in the dative, so is feminine. Perhaps this'll help you remember too, but maybe it won't. This just depends on how you learn and remember things. So that's all the unique lyrics of the song. On screen are the timings for the remaining lines, but they're all just repetition of what's already come up. So let me know if there are any other songs you want to see explained, but for now, thank you for watching.